UFC Fight Night, Jack Hermansson, Joe Pyfer in the main event this Saturday night back in the UFC Apex 1 week before the UFC heads to Anaheim, California for the featherweight championship fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria. We've got 14 fights on this card from the UFC Apex. Of course, the main event, Joe Pyfer, one of Dana White's guys from the Contender Series, is trying to break into the top 10 with a win over the Swedish Jack Hermansson. In the co-main event, Dan Ige taking on Andre Touchy Fili. You got Michael Johnson on this card as well. Rodolfo Vieira and Arman Petrosyan has been rebooked to this card as well. 14 fights on this card again from the UFC Apex this Saturday night. And folks, if you haven't yet though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. We do one of these every single week, and we'll be back next week for UFC 298 from, again, the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. We'll start things off in the bantamweight division between the undefeated Daniel Marcos and Aoriqileng. Marcos, of course, the Peruvian fighter, 15-0, 2-0 in the UFC with wins over Simon Oliveira in his first out over in Brazil in 2023. Won that fight by TKO in the second round, and then a split decision victory over Davy Grant after that. Now they book him against the Mongolian murderer in Aoriqileng, who is 3-3 in the UFC, came into the promotion losing back-to-back fights to Jeff Molina and Cody Durden. Yeah, he had the contract on the line against Cameron Else. He wins the fight, then beats Jay Perrin, loses to Aman Zahabi, where he gets knocked out in the first round. Then, and most recently, just a couple months ago, he beat Johnny Munoz Jr. by unanimous decision. Now, the Munoz fight again, he beats a guy who's 2-3 coming into that fight in the UFC. He wins. Again, he wins the fight by unanimous decision. You go back, you look at it, Aoriqileng kind of just dominated from pillar to post. The only success Munoz really saw was through the grappling and through his wrestling, but Aoriqileng was able to get the knockdown in the third. He was able to really just dominate on the feet that entire fight. The round that you can give to Munoz, I believe, is the first round. The second and the third, though, would definitely go to the Mongolian murderer. Again, you look at the odds for this fight, you got Marcos at around a 2-1 favorite. I get that. I think, I feel like this is an interesting fight for Aoriqileng because, he probably is fighting for his contract. Probably not. He's 3-3, but the wins for Aoriqileng are against non-UFC caliber guys, it feels like. Cameron Else was 10-5 going into his fight with Aoriqileng. He's now out of the UFC after that loss. Jay Perrin was 10-5 going into that fight. He lost to Raul Rosas after that, and now he's fighting in CES in a couple weeks, right? So it's just he hasn't been beating UFC caliber guys. The guys he's been losing to are solid. Jeff Molina, Durden, Aman Zahabi. Of course, we are seeing him now at bantamweight after he made his UFC debut in the flyweight division, which I do think is better for Aoriqileng because since moving to bantamweight, he is 3-1. The only loss being to Zahabi, where he just got put down early over in Canada in the summer of 2023. He gets Daniel Marcos in this fight, and Marcos is good. I mean, you see the Davy Grant fight. Could it have gone to Grant? I definitely think it could have. I think you're kind of hard-pressed to make the case, honestly, for Daniel Marcos to win the fight. You go back, you rewatch it. I think Grant does get the nod, but you look at Marcos' first fight, has a really good performance against Simon Oliveira. Now, Simon Oliveira is a guy who is 0-2 in the UFC in his own right, but Marcos is able to go in there. He's able to win that fight pretty handedly by finishing the second round. His win in the Contender Series is a win over Brandon Lewis. He was an underdog going into that. However, Brandon Lewis has not won a fight since losing to Marcos in the Contender Series. He lost one in United Fight League after that. Now he's going to be booked in CFFC next month in March. So again, it's a little problematic that neither of these guys have really fought the best competition. Again, Marcos does have a win over Davy Grant, which I would say is a very good guy to go in there and face. However, again, did he really win the fight? I don't know. When you look at this one, though, I think Marcos definitely has the advantage on the feet. This is a guy who really does not hit the mat at all. He's got 8 wins by knockout, 7 by decision, 0 by submission. I don't believe Marcos is he has gotten one successful takedown in the UFC, was in the Grant fight. But other than that, Marcos really does not go to the ground that often. He does have a good takedown. He does have a good defensive wrestling ability. And Aoriqileng is a guy who, he will mix it up. He'll look for the takedowns, but he does have power on the feet as well. That's something that is going to be a little bit concerning for Marcos, but I think Marcos is the way better striker. I think he's going to be in Aoriqileng's face, and I think he will be going in there. I think he's going to march him down, and I think he will win a decision. I don't think the finish is coming, but I think Marcos, again, remains undefeated. He's won 15 in a row professionally. Against anyone, that's a big deal. I know Scott Muscum just lost to Charles Johnson on the last card, and he was undefeated, but still, I like Daniel Marcos to go in here and win the fight. I like him as a 2-1 favorite. I think he does go out there and win the fight. Next up, we've got a UFC debut for Haider Amil. He'll be taking on Fernie Garcia, another guy in Fernie Garcia. Well, I don't think Aoriqileng's necessarily fighting for the contract, but Hyder Amil taking on Fernie Garcia. Garcia is a guy who I think is fighting for the contract in this fight. 10-4 professionally, but an 0-3 start to his UFC career. He wins in the Contender Series over Josh Weems. Weems, a guy who did get his shot in the UFC as well. He was a one and done. He loses to Christian Rodriguez, then he gets cut from the promotion. Garcia in this UFC run so far has gone out there, lost to Jerry Newsom by unanimous decision, lost to Brady Heastan by unanimous decision, and lost to Rinya Nakamura as well by unanimous decision. It is hard picking a guy, let's be honest, who is 0-3 in the UFC. It is tough. And he's taken on a guy in Hyder Amil, who I believe is coming off. Yeah, he's coming off his Contender Series win, but before that he went to LFA, and before that he was in Bellator. Fought on the Bellator prelims a lot, but then went to LFA, ended up winning in a main event spot against Chase Gibson back in 2022, then went to the Contender Series, picked up a pretty big win. Did struggle a little bit in terms of the grappling. You did see his opponent take him down quite often in that fight. Amil fired off decently, and he was able to still win a decision, but that was the one thing that you can point at that, maybe he had a little bit of trouble grappling in that fight. However, the guy he fought, pure wrestler, guy who shot for 23 takedowns. Yeah, again, he did get Amil down 5 times, but he was fighting a guy from Turkey who is a constant pressure, constant wrestler type fighter, and I really don't think that's a horrible performance at all for Hyder Amil. I think it was actually a pretty decent performance given the circumstances, given the guy he was going out there and fighting. But for Fernie Garcia, you look at his fight so far in the UFC, I think the closest fight was the Heastan fight. That was probably the closest by far, but again, even in that fight, Heastan had about 4 minutes of control in the third round. It was just that Heastan really didn't do all that much at points in the fight once he did get Fernie Garcia down. Rinya Nakamura had his way. Journey Newson kind of just beat Garcia to the punch every single time. It was primarily a striking fight and wasn't the best fight, but still Newson was able to get to Garcia before Garcia was able to get to Newson. Again, you're hard-pressed to pick anyone who's 0-3 in the UFC. Fernie Garcia, I don't know if this is right. I don't have odds just yet because, again, this fight was just made. Tapology's got Fernie Garcia at -245, Hyder Amil at +185. I guarantee you that's not correct. I do not see a world where Fernie Garcia is a -245 favorite. If he somehow is, smash the money line for Hyder Amil. It's not that even I think Hyder Amil is very good. I just think in this situation, Hyder Amil is in a very good spot to win the fight, because where does Fernie Garcia really beat him? Exactly. I think Hyder Amil is able to win. I think he's just able to do enough. I think he's going to go out there. He's going to outstrike Garcia. I think he's going to be able to fight off the takedowns well enough. Again, Amil is actually the older fighter in his UFC debut. He's only 8-0. I think he's able to go out there, though, still and win the fight and beat Fortis MMA's own Fernie Garcia by unanimous decision. And let's now go to the light heavyweight division. We have got Zach Pauga, the former runner-up in the Ultimate Fighter, taking on Bogdan Guskov in this fight. Pauga is a guy who is 6-2. Former heavyweight, but really just fought on the Ultimate Fighter at heavyweight just to get on the show, basically. You've seen that before with other fighters, like you saw Macy Chasson do that at 145 pounds. You've even seen Penny Kinzad did that, and going all the way back to the original Ultimate Fighter days, Rashad Evans did that a long time ago. So it's something that happens. Pauga's taken on Bogdan Guskov in this fight. Guskov's a guy who made his UFC debut. Interestingly enough, he fought Volkan Oezdemir in his first fight. Now, he loses the fight. Oezdemir took him down. Oezdemir knocked him down and took him down, and ended up winning the fight on the ground by a rear naked choke. Again, it was what you thought that fight was going to be. I didn't think Oezdemir is only a -180 in that fight. I kind of thought that was ridiculous, getting a guy who was making his UFC debut. Guskov, again, 14-3 professionally. He's coming off fights in MMA series. I believe that is a Middle Eastern. No, it's in. I guess they run fights in Armenia. They run them in Egypt. They run them in Russia. So I guess it's just a traveling promotion. That's fine. Guskov really hasn't fought anybody all that great. Again, it's hard to judge talent in those areas because, again, you see a lot of padded records. You don't know really good. You don't know really how good these regional guys are in these promotions. So Guskov, to me, is still kind of a question mark. He's from Uzbekistan, trains out of Russia. Didn't really get to see much out of him in the Volkan Oezdemir fight. He was outclassed in the feet. He was outclassed on the ground as well. Now, Zach Pauga is not a world beater by any stretch of the imagination. This is a guy training out of Colorado. He's 1-2 in the UFC. He's got a loss to Muhammad Usman on the Ultimate Fighter finale. He gets knocked out in that fight after winning the first. He beats Jordan Wright, but the Beverly Hills Ninja and Jordan Wright is not very good. And then he lost the fight to Modestas Bukauskas. Now, did he beat Modestas Bukauskas? I think he might have. I think that was a very close fight. It could have gone either way. Again, though, I don't think Paunga's all that bad. I think I know he got caught by Muhammad Usman, but that happens. The problem with Zach Pauga is, I think, the level of competition has not been that great. And you can make the same case about Bogdan Guskov as well. And that's kind of the trouble I'm having, at least early on in this card. I mean, sure, he's got a win over former UFC name Marcus Perez. He beat him over in Cage Warriors before making his UFC debut, or his Ultimate Fighter debut to Zach Pauga. A win over Jordan Heiderman, the PFL zone now. Heiderman, who made it to the 2023 playoffs in the heavyweight division for the PFL. Ended up getting submitted in the first round by Goltsov anyway, and he beat Patrick Brady in his fight. So, I don't know. It's a really tough fight to pick because, again, Pauga is, he's not that big for heavyweight. Again, he was a smaller heavyweight. He was easily able to make the cut down to 205 pounds. And for Bogdan Guskov, again, it is a complete question mark. What we've seen out of Guskov prior to the UFC has been dominant striking, quick fights. You look at his fights in MMA series, the last 3 fights he's had in MMA series, all 3 of them don't add up to 5 minutes in total. They're all first round finishes. His last 4 wins are by first round knockout, and really his last 5 fights as a whole, 6 fights as a whole, have ended in the first round win or loss. I think Zach Pauga, though, is still able to win. Again, this fight is just surrounded by question marks. It really is. Guskov on Tapology, at least 80% going with him, and 20% going Zach Pauga. The odds slightly do favor, though, Zach Pauga at -135. I am going to take Zach Pauga. I don't know what we're going to get at Bogdan Guskov. I've at least seen Zach Pauga. I've seen the striking game that he's able to show. The chin is decent. Again, he just did get checked and put down by Muhammad Usman, but that's going to happen. Usman does swing big, and Usman, maybe not the best technical fighter, but look how big the guy is. He is a pretty solid, power striker. I think Pauga's able to win. I'm going to go against the majority here on Tapology. I think Pauga is able to get the job done. Again, it's probably not what you want to hear because, again, you want plus money with Guskov. I pick fights. I pick the winners of fights that I think they're going to win. I pick who I think is going to win the fight. So I think Pauga is going to get it done. I'm going to take Zach Pauga to win the fight by unanimous decision. I think he's just able to touch up Guskov. Again, Guskov, I think, is kind of a question mark late in the fights as well. So I think, I've seen Pauga go full 15 and be fine. I think he's able to drag Guskov out. And if Guskov's not able to finish him in the first round, Pauga is able to win. I think Pauga's just going to get out that first and win 2 and 3 and win the fight 29-28. Okay, on to our next fight. We are going to the welterweight division. We will have Jeremiah Wells taking on Max Payne Griffin. Jeremiah Wells came into the UFC, I think I say this every time he fights, came into the UFC pretty old. He's 37 years old now, but he is 4-1 in the UFC. However, just saw his first loss in the UFC after he lost to Carlston Harris. I believe that was just in August. He lost to Carlston Harris. He is getting Max Griffin, a guy who has been around for a minute. Max Griffin is going to give you a solid test anywhere. He's 19-10, 7-8 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss, though, to Michael Morales in the summer of last year. Max Griffin went on a little run, I guess in 2020 and beyond. He beats Ramiz Brahimaj, beats Sung Kenan by knockout, then beats the natural-born killer Carlos Condit, then loses after that. He gets a step up in competition, loses to Neil Magny, then beats Tim Means, and then loses to Michael Morales. Again, Jeremiah Wells is a power puncher. He is going to come out there and he's going to swing. You saw that in the Court McGee fight, the Matthew Semmelsberger fight. He gets dropped twice by Semmelsberger, and it's a really weird scorecard in that fight. But Wells still picks up the victory. He was able to beat Blood Diamond, but again, any competent MMA fighter is going to be Blood Diamond. He beat Warley Alves in his UFC debut. It was a big upset pick when he won and beat Alves, a guy in Alves who was coming off a win over Munir Lazez of all people. But Wells, again, is coming off that loss to Carlston Harris. And in that fight, again, you look at it round by round, Jeremiah Wells is winning the fight. He easily wins the first round. He goes to his wrestling in that fight. He wins the first round. He gets 4 minutes of control against Carlston Harris in the first round. The second round, 4 minutes of control as well. The third round, doesn't get a takedown. Carlston Harris ends up getting him in an anaconda choke on the ground, and Harris ends up winning the fight. Okay, not ideal. He's taking on Max Payne Griffin, and Griffin is a guy who's going to be more than willing to strike with him, I think. Again, we've seen Max Griffin go to the wrestling some, but I think in this style of fight, I think you probably will see mostly striking. You got 2 older welterweights. I mean, it's make or break time for both these guys. It really is. Griffin's 38, Jeremiah Wells 37. Both these guys, if you're going to ever make a run into the top 15, it's going to have to be now. So the winner of this fight, again, is looking to do so. I think you will see Wells engaging some in the grappling and some in the wrestling, obviously. But I think on the feet, again, you will see a striking fight as well. I think you're just going to see a mixture of it. It really depends on what I think Wells chooses to do, because he looked good in the first 10 minutes of his fight against Carlston Harris. He went to the wrestling a lot in the Matthew Summelsberger fight. You know when he's on the feet, he will swing big. But he will mix that into the wrestling as well. He's never been taken down in the UFC either. Again, if anything, Wells will be the aggressor and pushing the pace in the ground, and Griffin will be the one trying to keep the fight on the feet. That all being said, I do think Wells is able to win. I think Wells' striking can keep up with Max Griffin's striking. I just don't know if Max Griffin is going to be able to get up once Wells has taken him down, and I don't think Wells is going to tire and make a mistake and get submitted like he did against Carlston Harris, because Max Griffin does not have the ground game that Harris does have. So I do think Jeremiah Wells does win. I'm not all that confident in the pick. I like him to win this fight, though, by unanimous decision. It's an Apex fight. It probably will go the distance. I've picked 4 decisions so far. Again, sometimes Apex fights just end up like that sometimes. Again, I think Wells is better on the ground. I think Wells is going to be able to keep Max Payne Griffin down. I think he's going to be in need of a win. After being 4-0 in the UFC, loses the fight. I think he's going to really want a victory here. I think he's going to take the easiest path to victory, which will be wrestling, and it won't be playing around the feet, because we have seen Max Griffin do very well on the feet before in the past. Look at the Song Kenan fight where the knockout, you see where he slices Ramiz Brahimaj's ear basically off of his head. The win over Carlos Condit where he knocks Condit down. And the win over Tim Means as well. I think Wells does play it a little safe, and I think Wells will win the fight. Not all that confident in the pick, but we're going with the favorite in Jeremiah Wells. Next up, a fight in the light heavyweight division. We will have Devin Clark taking on Marcin Prachnio. Clark is a pretty sizable favorite at -185. I don't feel like he should be that big of a favorite in this fight. Marcin Prachnio, sure, is not great by any stretch of the imagination. These are 2 lower level light heavyweights. However, I think this fight's a lot closer than at least the books are having it as. Devin Clark is 8-8 in the UFC. He is a 50-50 fighter. He's been fighting in the UFC for a very long time now. He made his UFC debut back in 2016. The main event of the fight night he was on was it was John Lineker and Michael McDonald in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Oh, by the way, John Lineker was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson in the co-main event, ended up being Tony Ferguson versus Lando Venata. That's how long, though, Devin Clark has been fighting in the UFC. He made his UFC debut and he lost to Alec Nicholson in the first round. 3 fights later, he fought Jan Blachowicz, right? Like, he's been around. He lost to Jan Blachowicz, obviously. But Devin Clark, he's a guy who's main evented a UFC fight night before. You go back to 2020, midst of the pandemic, he main events against Anthony Smith. Now, given that was supposed to be Curtis Blades, Derek Lewis, Blades tested positive, so then you had Clark and Anthony Smith main event. Again, in that one main event, Smith took him down, and Smith got the submission pretty quickly. Devin Clark since then has been not great. He's 2-3 since his first UFC main event, losing to Ion Cutelaba, beating William Knight, but again, William Knight just wasn't very good in that fight. William Knight wasn't good in the Marcin Prachnio fight either. He loses to Azamat Murzakanov. That's going to happen to you. The Professional's a really good fighter. Beats Da Woon Jung, and then loses to Kennedy Nzechukwu, like I think we all expected him to lose to Nzechukwu. I'm interested to see how this fight does go, because Prachnio doesn't really have a good win since Khalil Roundtree. The Khalil Roundtree fight's a huge outlier in the guy's career. It really is. Because you look at the fights that he does have, and I can't get these fights. When I think of Prachnio, I always think about his fight against Sam Alvey, where he walks in, hands down, boom, gets put down, and just gets back up and does it again. He loses to Magomed Ankalaev. I'm not going to judge the guy losing to Ankalaev. Ankalaev is likely next for the belt or a fight away from the belt. Loses to Mike Slow Rodriguez. They give him a 4th fight in the UFC, and somehow, someway, he beats the crap out of Khalil Roundtree. Like, he outstrikes him 2-1 in that fight, puts on 105 significant strikes on a Roundtree in that fight, wins every single round. I thought it's a huge outlier in the guy's career, because then he fights Ike Villanueva. Sure, he wins. I don't know how he goes from Roundtree to Villanueva, but he beats Villanueva. And then he loses to Felipe Lins. He beats William Knight, but Knight, I think that was the fight Knight weighed in like 100 pounds over. And then he loses to Vitor Petrino after that. Petrino submits him at UFC 290. Okay, Petrino's undefeated. That's fine. I'm not really, it's okay. Like, Prachnio wasn't really supposed to win that fight. Now you get him and Devin Clark. This fight can go so many ways. I really think it can. I think Devin Clark, again, the win over Da Woon Jung does show something. That's a pretty good win. However, Da Woon Jung, once undefeated in the UFC after beating Kennedy Nzechukwu, was I think he was on the cusp of being ranked, and the guys lost 3 straight fights after. But that fight does stick out. That shows that, all right, Devin Clark is still decent, at least. He went out there and won the fight by decision. I just don't know how this fight goes. I think, again, the wrestling is going to be on the side of Devin Clark. Devin Clark definitely will probably look to wrestle because Marcin Prachnio doesn't really do that. He's, again, primarily a striker. Prachnio's a guy who, outstruck Will Knight 79-8 when they fought in February last year. I think Prachnio actually is going to win, though. I think Prachnio is able to get the victory in this fight. I'm going to take the underdog at plus 160. Again, not confident at all. Devin Clark, this guy's 8-8 in the UFC, and sure, Prachnio is 3-5 as well. However, I think Prachnio actually is the better striker, and I think he's going to have more power. I think Prachnio will have a slight advantage up there. So I'm going to take the Polish fighter in this fight, Marcin Prachnio, at plus 160. Again, not horrible. I don't think Devin Clark should be a minus 200 favorite against really anybody. If this was coming off the Da Un Jung fight, I'd say, all right, maybe, but didn't look great in the Nzejuku fight. He got dropped, or did not get dropped by Nzejuku, but still Nzejuku kind of beat the crap out of him on the feet. I'm going to take Prachnio to win. I think he's the better striker. Give me Marcin Prachnio to win this fight by unanimous decision. So somehow, some way, Loma Lookboonmee has gone out to a 5-2 record in the UFC in the strawweight division, and again, she's been racking up wins. And when you look at what she's done in the UFC, the only 2 losses are not bad losses at all. They're losses that aren't bad to have. Angel Hill, Lupi Godinez. A lot of these fighters in the in the strawweight division will lose to them. And the wins, okay, Alexandra Albu, Jinyu Fry, Sam Hughes, Denise Gomez, Elise Reed. Are they the best wins? Some of them, no. But like a win over Denise Gomez is meaningful because Bruna Brasil, she's 1-1 in the UFC. Who is her loss? Denise Gomez. So if you want to play MMA math like that, Loma Lookboonmee has beat a fighter that Bruna Brasil has lost to. That means Loma Lookboonmee should win the fight. Am I saying that's going to happen upright? Maybe I am, because again, on paper, Loma Lookboonmee is a better version of Denise Gomez. She just is. And you saw that when they fought. Lookboonmee was able to get takedowns. She went 4 or 5 on takedowns in that fight, and she was able to outstrike Denise Gomez and basically win every single round in that fight. So again, Lookboonmee is a better version of Denise Gomez, and Bruna Brasil struggled with Denise Gomez, got dominated by Denise Gomez, got taken down 3 times, couldn't stuff the takedown once. She got taken down 3 out of 3 times, and got outstruck 54-15, and also got knocked down in that fight. And you're telling me that Bruna Brasil has a chance to beat Loma Lookboonmee? I really don't think she does. The one thing Lookboonmee does lack, and the one thing I think she is worse than Denise Gomez, is with power, and that that obviously comes like this. I guess, right? I think that's pretty obvious. You look at Brazil's win in the UFC. It's a win over Shanna Bannon. She wins the fight. It's not great. Brazil just kind of outstrikes her. She wins it 2-1. She's able to get 2 takedowns. But on the ground, I think Lookboonmee's better. You saw Lookboonmee's last fight. She was able to go out there and beat Elise Reed by rear naked choke in the second round. Given, was that about a year ago? Yeah, but she was able to submit Elise Reed. So her grappling is probably better than Bruna Brasil. I think her striking is way better than Bruna Brasil. Obviously, you got that Muay Thai base out of Loma Lookboonmee. And I think she's pretty easily the favorite in this fight and should be able to win this fight pretty decisively. Now, I never want to call a women's fight a lock because anything can happen in women's MMA. However, this fight feels as close to a lock as you're going to get. Loma Lookboonmee is a way better all-around fighter than Bruna Brasil. On the ground, the one thing Brazil might have her on is jiu-jitsu, but that's about it. Lookboonmee is still very solid on the ground. We said, again, the one thing she lacked compared to Denise Gomez was the power. Well, pure striking-wise, she should be able to beat the ever-living hell out of Bruna Brasil. Give me Loma Lookboonmee to win the fight by unanimous decision. She beats Bruna Brasil everywhere. She's going to dictate where this fight is end up. And I think Lookboonmee, again, is the all-around better fighter. I don't think this one's honestly all that close. Again, still haven't picked a finish yet on this card. Hopefully we get it next, and I think we just might. We have got Damir Hadzovic coming back to take on Pelagi Oki in this fight. Oki is a guy who is coming into UFC debut, fighting out of Belgium. He won in the Contender Series in a really nice combination where he eventually finished Dylan Salvador, worked to the body, then went it back up. Looked really good in that fight. Oki is undefeated. Other than one fight, he's 8-1. His first fight in the UFC, or first fight in professional MMA, he did lose back in 2018. Again, the guys that Oki has fought maybe haven't been the greatest, if we're being honest. He hasn't fought the best competition. Other than one fight, he fought a guy who was 13-0 at one point in Atomic in 2022. But I think that's going to be kind of enough to propel him to a victory over Damir Hadzovic. This feels like a fight they are trying to get Oki over on here. And there's going to be one that's coming up next. I'm going to talk about it as well, where it feels like they're trying to get a Contender Series guys to get going. And honestly, it feels like Hyder Amil and Fernie Garcia is just that as well. But this is another one where this is a fight where the up-and-coming guy from the Contender Series and Pelagi Oki, from Belgium, another market of MMA. This is a fight where the UFC is saying, all right, you go out here and you get a quick finish, and we're going to put a rocket to your back, and we are going to promote you. Because Damir Hadzovic, again, the Bosnian fighter, now training out of Denmark, he's 4-5. He's traded wins and losses, but in his last 4 fights, he is 1-3. The only win being against Yancy Medeiros, who's no longer in the UFC. The loss to Christos Giagos, Renato Money Moicano, and Mark DeCasey. Again, Oki should just be better than Damir Hadzovic in this fight. Hadzovic can strike, don't get me wrong. He's willing to get into a firefight with you on the feet. However, if he gets into a firefight with Balaji Oki, I think eventually he's going to get knocked out. And that's what I think is going to really trouble Damir Hadzovic in this fight, because he gets hit a lot too. I know Yancy Medeiros does fight that type of fight where, again, he's willing to just, keep trading. But still, Hadzovic got hit a lot by Yancy Medeiros. If he gets hit a lot by Balaji Oki, what's going to happen? I think this fight's over pretty quickly, and I think Balaji Oki wins this fight by first-round knockout. I just think he's levels better than Damir Hadzovic at this point in Hadzovic's career on the feet. Hadzovic is 37 years old. He's not getting any younger, taking on a guy who is in his physical prime in Balaji Oki. Again, that's the reason Oki is trending now in the -300 range. Again, -270 currently, but I think that line is going to keep going up for Balaji Oki, and for good reason. This guy's a very talented striker. Do I think this fight hits the mat? I don't think it will. Hadzovic struggled a lot in the ground his last fight, given, yes, that is the new version of Mark DeCasey, but that's always what's happened to Damir Hadzovic. Hadzovic has fallen back on his striking because he's been able to get taken down so easily. Alan Patrick did it 9 times. Giagos did it 6 times. DeCasey did it 8 times. I remember that's why it was the Hadzovic-DeCasey pick felt so easy. It's because we've already seen that recipe before where Hadzovic has lost. Now, do I think Oki goes to the ground? No, I think he's going to stand and bang, but I think that's going to work to his advantage. Balaji Oki should win this fight pretty easily. We have not seen Hadzovic in about 2 years. Oki is the way fresher guy. He's going to be the way faster guy, and he's going to have way more power. This is one of the easier fights to pick on this entire card. Balaji Oki, in his UFC debut, will win the fight by first round knockout. And what I was mentioning earlier, this is another fight where it feels like the UFC are trying to push a certain fighter, and it will be the UFC debutant fighter in Carlos Prates. Now, Prates is only 1 year younger than his opponent in Trevin Giles, but still, Prates is a guy who is 17-6, coming off of the Contender Series, and now he will get Trevin Giles on the featured prelim. Now, Giles, again, a fighter who has traded wins and losses as well. He has been around in the UFC. He's 7-5. He's fought even the likes of Dricus du Plessis, lost to du Plessis by knockout in the second round on a Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier undercard. He gave Roman Dolidze his first loss. Now, Dolidze did not look good in the Imavov fight, but that's besides the point. Giles has been he's been put in the spot before, where he's been put in the spot where, all right, you're basically the gatekeeper to the top 25, which is kind of a, it's a tough spot, but that's kind of where I feel like they put Trevin Giles. They did that to Dricus du Plessis. They did that to Michael Morales. They did that to Louis Cosi. They did that to Preston Parsons, and they did that to Gabriel Bonfim. Now, Cosi and Parsons are on the level of Bonfim, Morales, and obviously none of these guys are on the level of the world champion now in Dricus du Plessis. But still, Morales and Bonfim are undefeated prospects, rising in the ranks, and they both got handed Trevin Giles, and they both beat Trevin Giles. Now, for Gabriel Bonfim, since then he lost to Nicholas Dalby. Okay, not a good loss at all. But for Michael Morales and Bonfim, at the time, they're both undefeated fighters who were, again, booked against a UFC veteran in Trevin Giles, and that's the litmus test. We're going to determine how good you are by fighting Trevin Giles. If you're not as good if you can't beat Trevin Giles, Louis Cosi and Preston Parsons, then you don't deserve to be at the top of the weight class. Or, at least you don't deserve the promotional push that we're willing to give you. Carlos Prates is going to get that treatment right now if he can beat Trevin Giles. This is a guy who's 17-6, but he's on a huge winning streak. He has not lost a fight since 2019. It's been 5 years since this guy has lost a professional MMA fight. He's coming over from LFA, where he was, did well over there, went 2-0, got the shot in the Contender Series and knocked out Mitch Ramirez in the second round. And Ramirez, another guy who was undefeated at the time, fighting in LFA, tough enough. He beat Jeremy Holloway in XMMA. Not a horrible win at all in the Contender Series for Carlos Prates. This is a guy who is going to stand and bang with you. He has seen a little bit of trouble on the ground before in the past. He's been submitted 3 times, been knocked out twice. Again, this is a guy who has been there before. He's not a young guy coming in. He is a veteran who has been around, who will be making his 24th walk to a professional MMA cage in this fight. He has fought more professional MMA fights than Trevin Giles, and Trevin Giles has had 12 of those in the UFC. So again, I don't think experience is an issue here. I think all around Prates is ready for this test. This is a guy who has been well tested before. Again, he has not lost in 5 years. He's won a bunch of fights since. Some are modified rules fights, but if you include those modified rules fights, he's won 10 in a row. I think Prates is better here. I think he's the way better striker. And again, you saw a bunch of decisions to start off this card. This is where the finishes start to come. Prates is going to get another finish in this fight, just like I think Balaji Oki is going to get in the fight before this. Carlos Prates is going to go out here and get a first-round knockout. Back-to-back first-round knockouts here. Prates is here to make a statement. It is the featured prelim. Trevin Giles has struggled some in the past with some decent strikers. He got submitted by Bonfim, but Michael Morales and Drix Duplessis were both able to knock out Prates. And again, these are the tests they are giving Trevin Giles. The guys he's able to beat, he beats him by decision. The guys he's not able to beat, he goes out there and he gets knocked out. or finished, but like Bonfim submitted him. I think this fight is directly pointing to a Carlos Prates victory. Prates is going to go out here and pick up his UFC debut win. Prates by first round knockout. The next fight will be the opener of the main card. It is Rodolfo Vieira taking on Arman Petrosyan. I already talked about that fight when it was supposed to happen in Brazil. Petrosyan pulled out the very last moment due to an illness. So it's the same fight. I'm just going to run back that original prediction and we'll move on to our next fight in the lightweight division. So we've got Rodolfo Vieira taking on Arman Petrosyan. Again, it's every Rodolfo Vieira fight, and it kind of they all feel the same. It's just, can Rodolfo Vieira get the fight down? If you can get on the ground, you know how good this guy is. Again, this guy's nickname is literally the Black Belt Hunter. He goes out there and he tries to submit you. That's what he does, and that's what he's so good at doing. He's only fought once this year, and it was his win over Cody Brundage, where he submits Brundage in the second round. Brundage drops him earlier in the fight, but Vieira comes back. He ends up getting the submission. He wins a power arm triangle choke in the second round. Brundage drops him in the first, but the second, Vieira is able to get the fight down. He's able to get the arm triangle. It's all dependent on how Rodolfo Vieira fights and if he's able to get the fight down or not. That's basically how his fights go. Petrosyan's good though. Arman Petrosyan, I believe 3-1 in the UFC. Yes, 3-1 in the UFC. A big win over Gregory Rodriguez in his UFC debut. Thought he probably should have lost that fight, but he wins it by split decision. Loses to Caio Borralho, but Borralho's really good, who we're going to talk about in a moment. Beats AJ Dobson. It beats Christian Leroy Duncan in his next one, where he's an underdog in that fight. He beats him on the Vittori Cannonier card in the Apex, again, earlier this year. Petrosyan's striking game's good. He's going to go out there and he's going to give you a good striking test. However, it's all dependent on if Petrosyan can stop the takedown of Rodolfo Vieira, and that's what's always hurt Rodolfo Vieira in the UFC. It's been the wrestling. And, well, obviously it's been striking too. He doesn't have a good striking game. But if Vieira is able to take you down, it's big trouble. That's the thing, though. He hasn't really been able to get those takedowns. He's a really good jiu-jitsu player, obviously. He might be one of the best guys, if not the best jiu-jitsu guy in the UFC. But what has always hurt him is the gas tank that did hurt him in the Anthony Hernandez fight. His first loss in the UFC. So the gas tank is there, but he was able to go 15 full against Chris Curtis. Just wasn't able to get a takedown in the Curtis fight. I think like 0 for 16 on takedown, 0 for 20 for takedowns in that fight. And again, that just signifies all of his problems. The 0 for 20 takedown attempts against Chris Curtis. Brundage, he was able to get down. He submits Brundage, and again, that's what he's gonna do. He's that good at jiu-jitsu. The Dustin Stoltzfus fight, he gets Stoltzfus down in the third round. He submits him with the rear naked choke. That's what he's going to do. The Safarov fight, he gets him down, submits him in the first round. Oscar Piotr fight, takes him down in the second round, and gets the submission in the second round. If he's able to get you down, he's effective. But that's the big if he can take you down. I don't know if he's able to get Petrosyan down. Petrosyan's a guy, 36% takedown defense rate in the UFC. He was taken down 3 times by AJ Dobson, so Dobson goes 3 for 3 on his takedowns in their fight at UFC 280. Again, it obviously didn't affect Petrosyan because he wins every single round. But again, Dobson was able to get him down. Borralho was able to get him down and hold him down the entire fight. However, I don't put much into that because Borralho will do that to a lot of guys. That's how Caio Borralho fights. He's a dominant wrestler with really good grappling, and he's going to hold you down, and he's going to make sure you're down there the entire fight. And I have a sneaking suspicion that's what he's going to do to Abus Magomedov. I like Abus Magomedov. I made a whole video about Abus Magomedov, which we'll talk about later. However, again, Caio Borralho, that's how he fights, and he's such a tough guy. So you don't put much in the loss for Petrosyan, at least in that one. And Gregory Rodriguez took him down a couple times, but still, I don't think it's the end of the world. I just don't know if Vieira can take Petrosyan down. I don't think he's going to be able to, because he's gonna have to walk through the boxing to a Petrosyan at the same time. He's gonna have to walk through what Petrosyan is gonna throw at him. I think it's incredibly tough, if I'm being honest. I think Petrosyan's going to win the fight. Now, he hasn't gotten a finish so far in the UFC. I think this is it, because I don't know if Vieira is really able to stand with him for 15 minutes. So it was surprising that Vieira was able to stand there for 15 minutes against Chris Curtis, right? Because Curtis does have a good striking base. He knocked out Joaquin Buckley before. So again, that's going to be something, right? If I think Petrosyan's able to finish Vieira, something that Chris Curtis couldn't do, even though Curtis had 15 minutes on the field with him. I just think, again, I think Petrosyan, he hasn't finished anyone in the UFC. That's fair. But I think that's kind of an anomaly, the fight where if Vieira was able to stick in there for 15 minutes and not get finished by Curtis, I think eventually he will get finished by Petrosyan. I think Petrosyan eventually will knock him out. So I'm going to take Petrosyan and win by second round knockout. Again, I just don't see it. I don't see Vieira getting a takedown, and kind of in all Vieira fights, if you can't get a takedown, you can't get the fight down, he's going to lose. So give me Arman Petrosyan to win this one. I like him to take it by second round knockout. Again, it's a problem if Vieira's not able to get it down, and he's not able to get this fight down. Okay, and here it is. It will be Michael Johnson taking on Darius Flowers in the lightweight division. Yes, Michael the Menace Johnson is still fighting. He's 13-5 in the UFC, and he'll be making walk number 29 to the UFC Octagon this Saturday night. Now, he's 2-2 in his last 4, wins over Alan Patrick and Mark DeCasey, and losses to Jamie Mullarkey and Diego Ferreira. A lot of people thought Michael Johnson beat Mullarkey. I thought he did too. Now, the Diego Ferreira fight, got put down his ass because he got knocked out cold. That wasn't great. Now he's taking on Darius Flowers, a guy who is making his second walk into the UFC Octagon. He got his first shot over in Utah, where he lost to Jake Matthews. He got submitted in the second round of that fight back at UFC 291. Now he is given Michael Johnson. Darius Flowers hits hard, though. He does. Now, what has really stumped Flowers so far in his UFC career is grappling. He has had a lot of trouble with jiu-jitsu. Like how Jake Matthews submitted him. He's been sub 5 times. He's 12-6-1, and 5 of those 6 losses do come by submission. That is interesting. Now, is Michael Johnson going to take him down? He's not. That's not what Michael Johnson does. Michael Johnson has not gotten a takedown since the Alan Patrick fight in 2022. Before that fight, you got to look all the way down to his fight in 2018 against Artem Lobov, the last time he got a takedown. That's not what Michael Johnson does. Michael Johnson's in there, and he's trying to scrap. So take that element out of the fight. Darius Flowers will not have to worry about that. Instead, he will have to worry about the striking of Michael Johnson. Now, Michael Johnson is 37 years old and Darius Flowers is 29. So again, 8 years younger is Darius Flowers. Again, if you take out the grappling, though, it makes Darius Flowers that much better. This is a guy who trains out of Elite Boxing Academy in Mason City, Iowa. Again, and that's what he is. He is a boxer. Now, Darius Flowers is going to struggle a lot with guys who can grapple, obviously, like Jake Matthews did that. But I really don't think that Michael Johnson is going to be engaging in a grappling fight against Darius Flowers. I just don't see it happening. Now, when you look at Darius Flowers' fight against Jake Matthews, because this guy came in off the Contender Series, he won it due to the guy having an injury. Now, it was because of a takedown, a slam, but still, he got a takedown and the guy got injured. I believe that's how it went. So, or was it, I think, his opponent shot in and he got hurt. Right, so Flowers gets into the UFC, fine. They offer anyone a Contender Series contract now, because again, you're just giving him 12-12. Who cares? It's fine. Flowers gets the Jake Matthews fight, and he holds his own in the first round. He gets a takedown in that first round, which again is fine. He just struggles on the ground with jiu-jitsu a lot, but he does shoot takedowns. He shot 3 of those in the Jake Matthews fight. But his boxing wasn't horrible in that fight. He held his own against Matthews. I thought he lost the first round, but it was still close. The second round, that's where Matthews starts to distance and further himself from Flowers, and that's how Flowers got desperate, looked to shoot for takedowns, couldn't get it. Now, in a Michael Johnson fight, though, I feel like Darius Flowers will have a pretty good edge in this fight. I think he will. Now, again, Johnson is still a decent striker at his age, but Darius Flowers feels like a younger version of Michael Johnson. I think he's quicker than Johnson. I think he's got more power than Michael Johnson. And I think Darius Flowers is able to win the fight. Again, you look at the odds. Flowers is a slight underdog. Michael Johnson is a slight favorite. 71% going with Michael Johnson on Tapology. 29% going with Darius Flowers. I'm going to be part of that 29%. I'm taking Darius Flowers to win the fight. And I'm taking him by knockout in the second. Again, this card is going to ramp up quickly. I picked like 7 decisions in a row. And now here we go, 4 straight finishes. Because that's how this card kind of looks. The undercard's not very good. The main card, you're going to see a lot of finishes. I think Darius Flowers is unfortunately going to do to Michael Johnson I think Darius Flowers is going to do to Michael Johnson what Cross Diego Ferreira did to him. I really think so. I think Flowers is going to catch him and Flowers is going to put him down. Eventually, the chin is going to catch up to Michael Johnson. He's 37, and again, 29 UFC fights is a lot. That is a lot of damage that your chin and your body has taken. And unfortunately, I like Michael Johnson, but unfortunately, I think he's going to fall victim to a Darius Flowers knockout here. Again, I still think Flowers is solid. He had a solid run in LFA before coming into the UFC, picked up a bunch of knockout finishes over there. I think Darius Flowers is able to pick up the victory, and I think he's going to get it done by finishing the second round. Again, the power advantage goes to him. I think Michael Johnson and him will both be competitive in this fight, but I just think Flowers is going to catch him. Give me Darius Flowers doing the fight by second round knockout. On our next one here, in the middleweight division, we have got Brad Tavares taking on Gregory Rodriguez. For Tavares, he's coming off of a win over a one-leg Chris Weidman. And for Gregory Rodriguez, he got a nice bounce-back win over Dennis Tululin after losing, of course, to Bruno Ferreira over in Brazil. So for Gregory Rodriguez here, Rodriguez, however you want to say it, the Dennis Tululin win was good. He took him down. He kind of did what everyone expected him to do. Tululin, not very good. He took him down and he just elbowed the crap out of him. Now, did he hit him in the back of the head? He might have. He kind of did, but whatever. We're not going to talk about that. He still picked up the win by knockout in the first round, TKO on the ground. Whatever. That's all fun and games. Rodriguez, he did get his, momentum kind of squashed after he got knocked out by Ferreira in Brazil. I mean, both those guys hit hard, and, Ferreira connected on the chin before Rodriguez was really able to connect on the chin. He had a great fight against Chidian Jokawani that he won in 2022. Fight of the night. He's got split open, right here really badly, and he still ended up winning the fight by TKO in the second. Beat Julian Marquez in 2022 as well. Lost to Arman Petrosyan by split decision. Beat Junior Park. Beat Dusko Todorovic. Rodriguez is all around very solid, and this is his chance to really break into the top 15. It is. Again, the Ferreira fight gonna happen to you. You're gonna get knocked out. Ferreira since then has beat Phil Hawes. Lost a fight in between, but still, you're going to lose fights like that. Now they are giving him a very big opportunity in Brad Tavares. Brad Tavares is a guy who has fought the best in the UFC. He's fought Israel Adesanya. He's fought Robert Whittaker. He's fought Dricus du Plessis. He's fought Chris Weidman. He's fought very good fighters, and now they're giving him Gregory Rodriguez. Tavares has been in a lot of fights as well, though. He's been knocked out 4 times to the likes of Bruno Silva, Edmund Shabazian, Robert Whittaker, and Tim Boach. Surprisingly enough, Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis were both not able to finish the guy, but Gregory Rodriguez is going to come in here, and he's going to come in swinging. Now, I really don't know how to approach Tavares' last fight against Chris Weidman because he won. And again, Weidman was not able to get a takedown. Chris Weidman is obviously a shell of his former self. Tavares is kicking the hell out of his legs, which why wouldn't you do that? Because again, Weidman, after the injury. So again, he fought a Chris Weidman who is washed up, unfortunately, and I can't believe Chris Weidman's going to keep fighting. He will be fighting in Atlantic City, New Jersey later this year against Bruno Silva. I don't think it's going to go too well for Chris Weidman. If he's able to get a takedown, though, he might be able to win, but we'll see. I just don't think he has the explosiveness anymore. I just don't think he does. But Tavares, he wins the fight, sure. Before that, though, he loses back-to-back fights to Silva and du Plessis. Silva knocks him out in the first round in their fight in April of 2023 on the Pavlovich Blades card. Dricus du Plessis and Tavares had a good scrap. Tavares actually wins a round in that one, but du Plessis in the end does enough. And what Tavares is pretty good at, though, he's a very good defensive wrestler. You're not going to be able to take him down. Again, Weidman goes 0 for 8. Du Plessis goes 0 for 7. However, Rodriguez really isn't looking to do that all the time. I mean, there are fights where he does look for the takedowns, but I think he'll be more than happy to go out there and strike with Brad Tavares. It comes down to the pure striking game, and the pure striking game I like more is Gregory Rodriguez. I like RoboCop's game a lot more. Sure, he is able, he leaves himself to get tagged, and he leaves himself to get knocked out. However, Tavares doesn't have the most power, so I'm not too concerned about that. Yeah, Rodriguez will be hit, but he's not going to be hit to the point where he's going to get knocked out. I still like what Rodriguez is able to bring. I think he's got way more power than Brad Tavares, and I think he'll be able to rock him, and I think he'll be able to put Tavares down. I think Rodriguez will be able to win the fight. I'm going to take RoboCop here. Again, he had an unfortunate loss to Bruno Ferreira. That's going to happen to you. Again, you're going to get knocked out by power knockout artists. However, this is a fight where he's able to stay in there, and I think he's able to really swing and battle with Brad Tavares, and I think Rodriguez will have more left in the tank than what Tavares will have. This is going to be a war in the Apex. I think Rodriguez is going to win this war. Give me Gregory Rodriguez to win the fight by second round knockout. I just think he's got more power. I think there's a chance they definitely go blow for blow in this fight, And I think in a fight where they go blow for blow, I'm taking Gregory Rodriguez every day of the week. I just think his power is going to be able to hold up more. Tavares has been in fights like this before, and he's been able to stay in the fights with guys like Duplessis. But the difference is, again, Rodriguez really doesn't care. He's just going to go in there, he's going to try to close distance, and he's going to make Tavares knock him out. Because if he doesn't, then Rodriguez is going to win. I think Rodriguez will get the job done. Give me Gregory Rodriguez to win the fight again. I like him by second round knockout. On to our next one. It is a late replacement fight, and in comes Ihor Potieria to take on Robert Bryczek in this fight. Now, Potieria, he's fought at 205 pounds in the UFC. Okay, that's great. He's now going down to 185 pounds, taking the fight on short notice and a week's notice. Originally supposed to be Albert Duraev versus Robert Bryczek here. And now Potieria is taking the fight on short notice. And this is a guy who is 1-3 in the UFC. Just got TKO'd by Rodolfo Bellato back in 2023 in December of that year. He's 1-3. His only win is against a 42-year-old Shogun Rua, where he did a Fortnite dance after he beat him. He's been knocked down all 3 of the other fights. And now he's taken on a very skilled fighter, finally coming into the UFC. He's a former Octagon guy, Robert Bryczek, coming in from Poland. And if you don't know, Polish MMA breeds great fighters. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Mateusz Gamrot, Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Polish MMA is very good. Jan Blachowicz. There are very good Polish fighters, legendary Polish power. Bryczek feels like another one of these guys coming over from Poland that is going to make an impact in the UFC. I think the Duraev fight was going to be really good. He's supposed to fight Jacob Malkoun last year. That's fine. But now you're gifting him a guy who's coming down 20 pounds in weight on short notice, who's already 1-3 in the UFC. He's already been knocked out 3 times in the UFC. And Bryczek has won his last 5 fights by first round knockout. Take it to the bank. I don't care. As long as Robert Bryczek doesn't come out here and fight like an absolute dumbass, he should be able to win the fight by first round knockout. Potieria is there to be hit every single time. This guy is not very good. He's coming down 20 pounds in weight, and he's only taking the fight on short notice. Now, I read that, Potieria has done this. He has done a cut like this before. He tested it out, and he said he was fine. He could make the weight at 185 pounds. But remember the last guy who did a practice cut and then fought recently right after? Yeah, Tony Ferguson. And he got absolutely dominated by Justin Gaethje at UFC 249. What is going to happen to Ihor Potieria in this fight? He's going to get demolished by a UFC debuting fighter, Robert Bryczek, but not a guy coming off the contender, not a guy who, is an up-and-coming guy. No, this guy's 33 years old, and he is a very good name. He's a very good fighter. This is going to be hell for Ihor Potieria. If he's able to get picked apart before on the feet against some of these guys, and sure, I'll give him credit. He knocked down Bellato in their fight in San Antonio. I think it was in San Antonio. He was able to do that. That's great. We got knocked out by Carlos Olberg. He got knocked out by Nikolai Negumereanu. The guy is he's not great, and they're not doing him any favors, but he wanted the fight. They're not doing him any favors, though, by allowing him to go down 20 pounds in weight and taking on a knockout artist. It's not going to go well for him. I don't know how else to put this. Again, Bryczek's been around. He's 17-5. He's on a 6-fight first-round knockout streak. Yeah, I don't think this one's going to go all that well for the guy who's been knocked out in the first round. Or sorry, Bellato fight won in the second, but still he's been knocked out in 3 fights in the UFC. And the one win is against Shogun in Brazil, against, again, a 42-year-old Shogun. The guy's got power, sure, but Bryczek is not going to be hit by that. Bryczek's a lot faster, and I really don't, again, this is the lock of the night. No chance Potieria goes down 20 pounds in weight and beats a guy like Robert Bryczek. It's not going to happen. Bryczek by first round knockout. Excuse me. On to the next one here. We have got the co-main event. Dan Ige taking on Andre Fili. Originally not supposed to be Andre Fili, supposed to be Leron Murphy taking on Dan Ige, but in comes Fili on short notice for this fight. Not a bad fight at all. Dan Ige, again, is a guy who's willing to fight anyone, anywhere. He's a tough guy to finish. He has not been finished ever in his professional MMA career. I believe, was it Calvin Kattar who said he's got a big Hawaiian head and he's hard to knock out? I think that was Calvin Kattar who said that once upon a time. Or is that Josh Emmett? I don't know. But yeah, Dan Ige taking on Andre Fili in the co-main event here. Andre Fili, man, this is a guy who every time he gets a big name, he loses. Seriously, you look at his fights, and we can go through them, but every time Fili gets a somewhat big name and gets in a spot like this, he doesn't win. Like, I'll excuse of course the fights between Holloway and Rodriguez, because those are before all these guys, like, these guys were big, right? And even Calvin Kattar. But Michael Johnson, I remember, was Fili's first big chance. Co-main event spot, I believe it was in Omaha, Nebraska. Justin Gaethje and James Vick in the main event. He loses the fight by split decision. I thought Johnson won. Fili didn't like the scorecards. I thought Johnson got the win. Okay, then he wins 2 more fights though, gets Sodiq Yusuff on a Conor McGregor main card, and he loses. Beats Charles Jourdain, gets Bryce Mitchell, loses. Then, lose to Joanderson Breathu, but beats Bill Algeo, gets Nathaniel Wood in England, and loses. Now he's coming off a win over Lucas Almeida, UFC 296, first round knockout victory, just in the last 2 pay-per-views ago. Turns that right into a fight against Dan Ige. Can he go out there and pick up the win? I don't know. Ige's a very solid boxer. He really is. Ige's got a lot of skills in the feet. He gets beat when guys are able to take him down. Remember his main event spot against Chan Sung Jung, which turned out to be a #1 contenders fight, because the winner of that fight, Korean Zombie, ended up fighting Alexander Volkanovski. So again, Ige's been in spots before where he's been close to the belt, and he gets Chan Sung Jung, and the difference in that fight, because Ige held his own in the feet, the difference was the 3 takedowns the Korean Zombie was able to land, and Zombie was able to win the fight. Then Ige fights Josh Emmett, close fight but loses. Movsar Evloev took him down 9 times in the fight. He loses. Wins back-to-back fights though by beating Damon Jackson and Nate Landwehr, and then he goes on to fight Bryce Mitchell, and Mitchell is able to take him down and keep him down. 5 takedowns in that fight. Again, Ige has been in the main events before. Look at the Calvin Kattar fight. They went back and forth. Kattar was able to pick up the victory. Outstruck Dan Ige 105-84 in that fight. Again, went all 5 rounds. Pretty solid fight. Turns that right back into a first round knockout victory in 22 seconds over Gavin Tucker, a guy in Tucker who was undefeated at the time. And really, Ige took all of Tucker's hype away, because Tucker didn't fight after that for another 2.5 years. So now you get Ige and Fili here. I think Dan Ige wins the fight. I think a lot of people are pointing to Dan Ige to win the fight. I ultimately feel like this is somewhat of a levels fight here. Dan Ige is a guy who will be in the top 15, which feels like forever. Do I ever think Dan Ige is going to break into the top 5 and potentially win a world championship? I'll be honest with you, no. But I think Dan Ige is going to be one of these guys that is always around in the featherweight division and is always there, and it sucks to say, but he's always going to be the top 10 gatekeeper. He always will be, or even the top 15 gatekeeper. Because I just don't feel like Andre Fili is yet at that level. He's 33 years old. He's been in the UFC for a very long time. But we've seen him get chinned before against Joanderson Breathu. Nathaniel Wood was able to have a lot of success in the feet. Both those guys traded knockdowns, but still Wood was able to get the better of him. The fight over Lucas Almeida is great. It's a big knockout victory, sure. Dan Ige, though, is such a tough guy to hit, and he's such a tough guy to drop. He just is. Ige is that good in there with his chin, and he relies on his chin some, sure, but that's able to propel him to victories a lot of the time, and Ige's able to walk his guys down. Ige's able to have a lot of success in the feet as well. So I really like Dan Ige to win the fight here. I'm taking Extreme Couture's own in this one. Ige's going to win the fight in the co-main event by unanimous decision. I just think he's better all around the feet. I think, again, he's able to withstand whatever Fili throws at him. I think Ige, again, is just a better all-around volume striker too. Ige's able to win the fight by unanimous decision. Going on in the main event here in the middleweight division, you have got Joe Pyfer, Dana White's guy. Be like Joe Pyfer takes on Jack Hermansson. And like the theme of this video and the theme of this card, there's been a lot of fights like this, and it applies in the same effect to this one too. This is the fight where the UFC is trying to get a guy and move him up the weight class, and they've already put a rocket to Joe Pyfer's back. This is the fight where you can put him in a main event, beat a guy who's been in the main event spotlight before in Jack Hermansson, who's a top 10 guy, and you get Pyfer in the top 10 here. This is what they are trying to do. The middleweight division is very thin. Let's be honest, it is. Roman Dolidze and Nasruddin Imavov are both in the top 10. It's a thin weight class. Bo Nickel's coming up, Hamzat Chimaev. Other than that, the belt keeps getting switched. Duplessis, Strickland, Adesanya, Pereira before that. Cannonier's there, Whitaker's there, Costa, Vittori, they're all in the weight class. But it's one of the all-around weaker weight classes in MMA. They are trying to get Joe Pyfer in the top 10, and they want Joe Pyfer to eventually challenge for a world championship. He is Dana White's guy, and they have given him a very good stylistic matchup here in Jack Hermansson. Because Joe Pyfer's not horrible with his wrestling. He's really not. He's not that bad to the point where Hermansson will just be able to take him down and control him down there. And on top of that, Joe Pyfer has got really good hands, and he's got so much power up there. Jack Hermansson is a very, okay, this is kind of disrespectful, but he's a much better version of Gerald Meerschaert. Okay, Joe Pyfer handled Gerald Meerschaert, and the fight wasn't that competitive. They've put Pyfer in this spot before. He's 3-0 under the UFC banner. He's gotten finishes in all 3 of these fights. He's already taken on the very good striker with a lot of power in Abdulrazak Alhassan, even though Alhassan has been a little hesitant to pull the trigger at times. But sure, he's already beat him. He took him down 3 times. He got an arm triangle choke in the 2nd round. He's taken on the grappler in Gerald Meerschaert. Now he gets a guy in Hermansson who will be able to strike with you, but who has not fought in over a year. And sure, he's got the grappling. He can do that. But I think Pyfer is good enough to keep the fight standing. I really think he is. I think Pyfer is able to control where the fight ends up. And once he gets Hermansson on the feet, this is going to be very tough for Jack Hermansson because this is not Sean Strickland. And again, would Sean Strickland beat Joe Pyfer? Yeah, he would. But in terms of stylistic matchups, Pyfer is not going to want to hang around the feet with Jack Hermansson and pepper him up for 5 rounds because that's what Sean Strickland, at least back in 2022, would do. Joe Pyfer is going to look for the knockout, and he's going to throw with all of his power, and he will likely land on Hermansson. You look at Jack Hermansson's fight against Roman Dolidze, really weird spot he gets stuck in, but he loses. I'm willing to dismiss that. The Chris Curtis win, Chris Curtis is all right. He's a borderline top 15 guy. Curtis got mad because he thought Hermansson was running from him the entire fight. I didn't think so. I think that partially that was Chris Curtis's fight or problem. Hermansson won. The fight was striking the entire time. Whatever. Hermansson, though, is going to get stuck in a striking affair with Joe Pyfer. That's how I feel about this fight. I think he's going to. I don't think he's going to be able to get the fight down, and that's going to be death to Hermansson in this fight. Eventually, Pyfer is going to get the knockout, and I think the UFC is going to get their way. You know what they want. They want a first-round knockout for Joe Pyfer. They want a knockout by Pyfer, but a first-round knockout would really solidify things and make it, all right, Pyfer's our guy, and now we can keep building him in the top 10 of the weight class. They're going to strategically book Joe Pyfer eventually until he gets to the, gets to the top 5. That's just what the UFC does sometimes. Let's be honest. That's kind of, they handpick opponents sometimes. That's what they do. And again, the easiest pathway to the top 10 for Joe Pyfer is Jack Hermansson, a 35-year-old Jack Hermansson who based on styles is a tough style. Pyfer's a tough style for Hermansson to deal with. Just is. It's a guy who's hard to take down and a very good striker who has power, which is really going to limit the game a lot of Jack Hermansson. Remember the last time Jack Hermansson was in a big main event? I know he was in a main event since what I'm talking about, but still, his first main event, Jared Cannonier, he goes out there and he gets knocked out really early in the fight. Right? I feel like that's going to be kind of like this. You look at that fight against Jared Cannonier, Hermansson's not able to get him back down. He gets 1 takedown in the first round. He goes 1 for 6, and that's the problem. Eventually, he got knocked out. I think the same thing's going to apply here. I think you see somewhat of a similar fight in this one. Hermansson's not able to get a takedown in the first round. Second round comes, boom. Pyfer puts him down. Pyfer wins the fight. That's where I'm going in this fight. I'm going Joe Pyfer to win the fight by second round knockout. I considered saying first round, but I think it will take a little bit of time, and that's where Joe Pyfer is going to get in. Joe Pyfer will settle in, and in his first UFC main event, Joe Pyfer is going to win the fight by second round knockout. Again, he's got the power, he's got all the skills necessary, and he's going to do exactly that. He's going to put Hermansson down, he's going to knock him out, because Hermansson will not be able to get the takedown. And then, again, if he's not able to get the takedown, Hermansson is a decent striker, but I don't think he's on the level of Pyfer. Now, again, the UFC they strategically place guys into fights. They've put Pyfer in the spot. He will now crack the top 10. Where do they book him next? Probably Roman Dolidze. Let's be honest. They're probably going to give him Dolidze next. And he can beat Dolidze, and then they can warrant him getting a top 5 shot next. And then they can book him against, I don't know, the winner of Brendan Allen, Marvin Vettori. And then after that, if Pyfer can somehow win that, then maybe Joe Pyfer's legitimately in a world championship spot. Because again, the UFC will find ways to get the guys they want into the top 5, and if they can't do that, then they just, go away with them, obviously. Looking at Edmund Shabazian. But that's what they do, and that's what they are trying to do with Pyfer, and that's why they've booked him with Jack Hermansson in a main event spot, and he's going to do exactly that to him. He's going to beat him by second round knockout. So folks, thank y'all for watching our UFC Fight Night predictions here with Jack Hermansson and Joe Pyfer in the main event. If you haven't yet though, make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video, and we'll see you for watching, at Mamba forever.